Hey, indie filmmakers, I'm Griffin Hammond.
I'm Nick Bodmer, and on this week's episode, the FAA is making it much faster for drone pilots to get flight authorization.
Plus, your questions about filming loud concerts, entering film festivals, and storing video assets. Hello, Nick.
Hello, Mr. Hammond. How are you, sir?
I'm good. So my friend Matt Edwards, who flies...
Sorry, Griffin, you've forgotten again. What do we do at the beginning of the episode? We do hashtag Ask Griffin.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
It's been a while. It's been a while. Griffin, what is your favorite show you've binged watched since binge watching became a thing?
I suppose that was probably Breaking Bad.
Boom, just all the way through, you're like, I've got it all in front of me, let's do it.
Yeah, I also binge watched The West Wing. But I think I enjoyed Breaking Bad even more.
Well, that's wrong, but that's okay. That's okay. And how short? Because there's what? Is there like 7 seasons of Breaking Bad, or not that many? 6?
I think it's in the ballpark of 6. Yeah.
Yeah. How fast did you watch it?
Like in maybe 3 months or something.
Okay, so pretty quick for that many seasons.
Yeah.
Very interesting. If you want to ask Griffin a non-filmmaking question, you can tweet with the hashtag AskGriffin, and I will pull it for the show. All right, now about your friend Matt Edwards. Sorry for interrupting.
Okay, now I'm going to start the show with my friend Matt Edwards, who is a drone pilot, among other things, in Bloomington, Illinois. And he sent me a link to an article recently about the FAA, and they are changing how you can get authorization to fly your drone near airports.
Okay.
Which I didn't even know how to go about this at all before. But one of the FAA's rules is, among other things, you can't fly over people. So you're not even allowed to fly in crowded urban areas. You can't fly above certain heights. There's other rules, but one of the big ones is like you can't fly within, what is it, like 4 miles of an airport?
It's a pretty wide margin, yeah.
Yeah. And that doesn't sound too bad. I mean, if you're in a place like New York, you're like, well, of course, this is not going to be good because there's LaGuardia and Newark and JFK, and it's such a tight city that I'm sure I am currently within 4 miles of all of these airports. So I'm going to have trouble flying. But the thing I keep finding, and maybe you've found this too, is whenever you turn on your DJI Spark and go to fly it, or look up the FAA maps and see where you can and can't fly, almost every suburb you're ever in has heliports at like hospitals.
Right. Yeah.
So you're almost always within 4 miles of a heliport, and it's like, what do you call the hospital or something?
And what's the rule?
Well, so I know commercial pilots who have their commercial license, there is a process for requesting to fly in these areas from the FAA. But the problem is, I think until now, it can take like 60 days or even 90 days to hear back. So you really have to plan this months in advance, your flight. And so the thing that Matt sent me that they're doing is there's this thing called the LAANC. What does this stand for? The Low Altitude Authorization and Notification Capability.
Oh,
and
sounds about right.
I guess they've been beta testing it over the last few months, and now they're going to add it to hundreds, I think 500 new airports all over the country, where it's like through an app you can just immediately automatically get authorization.
You know, what's interesting, I was just thinking I'm getting I'm in the process of getting a new house. And I realized my new house is much closer to the airport than my old one. So I'm wondering, will the Spark allow me to take off from my own backyard in my new house? Do you know what the range is?
Well, I think I've noticed that the Spark and DJI, I mean, they're continually changing these things, but it may not stop you from flying in that area. Okay. And I suppose you're probably allowed to fly until you hit that, what is it, like 400 feet threshold? There is some recreational range where you're okay. I would imagine you can't fly 400 feet and below right next to the airport. That'll probably be a problem. But I got to think that in your backyard, if you're flying around below a certain altitude, you must be okay. But I think if you want to go above that space, that's when you're asking for FAA authorization.
Oh, look at this.
Although
DJI has on their website a fly safe map where you can look and see the different zones that it recognizes. Yeah. And I am darn close to the restricted zone where you cannot launch. But I'm outside of it. I'm in the authorization zone where I would, in theory, need to use this system in order to fly.
Yeah. Well, and I've been using an app called Before You Fly, which is the FAA app, and it kind of it gives you all those things. It's the same data, I imagine, that DJI is grabbing.
It's interesting.
But so if you, I mean, one, this only applies to commercial pilots. So if you want to get these quick authorizations, and if you want to fly in urban areas, not over people, but you're probably within that 4-mile range, you may be able to use this LAANC system, which, let's see, it's debuting April 30th. They're actually rolling it out, like, it's kind of a beta. So they're rolling it out in separate regions around the country to start.
Yep.
So starting April 30th, they're gonna do the South Central USA, which apparently includes part of Illinois or maybe all of Illinois. And then it's like every month they're adding a new region. There's 6 regions. So by the end of September 13th, the whole country should be included, or at least these 500 major airports.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
But this, again, only applies to commercial flying.
Right. Yeah. And I imagine it's also only for the kind of flying that falls under FAA jurisdiction and not recreational low-altitude flying.
Gotcha.
But I suppose another reason to get a commercial license if you're doing a lot of drone flying and want to be able to fly in those areas. There are currently a few different apps that can do it. Like, this is a protocol that the FAA has developed, and people can use this in their own apps. So, like, one of them is called, let's see, what was the one I was looking at? I was looking at one called AirMap, which will utilize this.
It's nice that the FAA is kind of being forward-thinking about this and kind of trying to get ahead of the curve as opposed to just adding more layers of bureaucracy, you know?
Right, yeah.
Like an open API that other apps can use. You kind of don't expect that out of somebody like the FAA, but maybe I'm not giving them enough credit.
Right. Well, yeah, and even if you're not someone who currently has a commercial drone pilot license, it kind of bodes well for everyone. If they're making it easier for everyone, I'm sure the trend will start to trickle down. Like even if you're flying recreationally, the rules will become clearer and everyone benefits.
Guess how close my new house will be to the closest runway?
Within that 4-mile range?
2.5 miles. I mean, I'm right there.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And it's 1.5 miles where the DJI restricts you, like won't even allow you to take off.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Oh, and I think I've been saying 4 miles, but maybe it's a 5-mile range actually. Clearly, I don't know very much. This is why I have to ask Matt Edwards for help with these things.
The expert, Matt Edwards.
Yeah.
Well, should we answer some questions?
Yeah, let's answer some questions that we do know more about.
You probably don't, but we'll try. Email from Brandon in Seattle. I decided to enter film festivals, and I'm in pre-production so I can get started for these this year in Seattle, Washington. I just wanted to see if you had any tips or thoughts. Griffin, you ever entered a film festival before?
I have. And actually, I've met Brandon. He was in New York recently, and we met up.
Did you buy him a taco?
No. I don't buy every podcast fan a taco.
Okay, just wondering.
Although what's funny about you saying that is that
I know I've already figured that out. Don't tell
Nick
the
is
audience.
referencing.
They'll figure it out in the future.
Nick is referencing a taco joke from the bonus episode that will play after this episode next week.
How did that happen, guys? I can see into the future. You'll get the joke later. You'll laugh. You'll be like, that Nick, he was funny.
Anyway, I want to commend Brandon on being in pre-production and already thinking about film festivals and thinking about the timeline here. Because let's see, we're kind of in like the beginning. We're kind of in the thick of film festival season right now. All the big ones happen in March and April, and their deadlines will be around October, November this year. So getting your production done now is a good idea. I'm sure I've done this before on the podcast, but I should link to my full list of film festivals that I entered with Sriracha a few years ago.
Hey, you've got a nice spreadsheet, right? With all the dates and costs and all the important info, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure all the dates and costs have changed, but at least the kind of timeline is probably
correct,
similar.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and at least it gives you an idea of what's out there, what kinds of film festivals are available to you. And you should always go to filmfreeway.com. It's a great platform for just looking at what's out there. There's thousands of film festivals. But I'll share both those things at Hey.film. I guess, what other tips do we have for film festivals? Make your credits as short as possible,
right? I mean, you've got to apply to a lot to get into a few. Is that true or false?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I've been kind of strategic, and I think I've, especially the second time around, I entered film festivals that I'd gotten into before, so I kind of knew that I would have good luck getting in. Film festivals like to accept alums, but I had about a 50% acceptance rate, which I think is above average, especially if you're trying to enter like
for
all the big ones, Sundance
for
and
Sriracha.
South by. For both, for Sriracha. For Sriracha, it was around 50% most of the time, and then actually maybe it even improved because at a certain point I wasn't entering anymore, and people were just inviting me because they'd seen it at other festivals.
I'd like to invite you to my film festival, Griffin. It's a $200 application fee, though.
I think generally just diversify where you're entering. Don't just enter huge festivals. Maybe enter a couple big ones if you're feeling pretty good about your film, but try to find some festivals that fit the niche of your film. Enter some documentary film festivals or some Asian American film festivals. Like Sriracha did well with those because it was the story of a Vietnamese immigrant. And also make the credits really short, which I did not do with Sriracha.
Well, you had a lot of backers to thank. And
Yeah.
you gave me my own plate.
Yeah.
It's still my claim to fame. I still tell people about that. I like it.
Here's an email we got from Dan. And Dan has filmed a few weddings over the years. He's been using Canon DSLRs. And now he has access to a Panasonic GH5 camera. I imagine that's why he's directing this question at us. And he has a 12 to 35 millimeter lens and a 35 to 100 millimeter lens. His question is, he hasn't invested a lot in the Canon glass, so he's not stuck with that glass, but he's wondering, if you were going to start out doing wedding films right now, what camera gear and extras would you invest in? He currently has a few Zoom H1 recorders, lav mics, and Rode video mics, and Video Mic Pros. So he's not worried about audio equipment. He can get creative there, but he's wondering what we think about cameras, lenses, gimbals, and drones.
If I were going to go back and do weddings full time, what gear would I buy? That's a good question.
Well, hopefully he has tripods.
Yeah, got to have a good fluid head tripod. You got to have two tripods, one minimum with a fluid head. Nice fluid head.
And make sure that second one, I mean, probably both of them, height is really important here. For a wedding, especially the camera in the back, you don't want this thing to be a 5.5 foot camera or tripod. Like, you maybe need 7 feet to make sure you're getting over people when they stand.
So what camera would you get if you were on a budget, Griffin? What camera would you get? Would you go G85 or would you go all the way to the GH5?
Does the G85 have a recording limit?
No.
No, yeah, clearly not, because we use it for the podcast. So that's fine. Yeah, I don't see There's no reason you need a GH5.
Depending on your budget, right? I mean, I think like a GH5 and a GH5S might be a good combo. A lot of times when I'm shooting a wedding, my close-up camera, I'm using like a zoom lens that is not as fast as what I can put on my wide shot. So a little extra low light sensitivity would be helpful on a close-up camera. But then you also probably want a camera with in-body image stabilization to go to. So I think maybe a combo of a G85 and a GH5S or a GH5 and a GH5S would be a good 2-camera setup. I think a gimbal would be top of my list if I were going to start now. I had the Glidecam that I used quite a bit, but it was so cumbersome to set up and balance, and often I just didn't have time to deploy it. So I think a gimbal that you could just pop a camera onto and go would be awesome for run and gun shooting during a wedding.
And these days you can get something like the LAANC crane that I'm using for not much more than what we spent at the time on the Glidecams. That we had the Glidecam HD 2000s.
Yep. I still have my Glidecam HD 2000. Do people still buy those? Is that worth anything? Should I sell that?
So I thought about selling mine because I'm not using it right now. But because I had my first LAANC crane break on me, I'm keeping it because I just keep thinking, like, if I'm on let's say I'm on a 2-day shoot in the city and it breaks on day 1, at least I know I have this. The Glidecam can't really break. It doesn't have any electronics.
Right. Well, if you want to buy my Glidecam HD 2000, send me an email.
At Nick at Hey.film.
But I would go gimbal for sure. Audio is probably super critical. It sounds like you've got a good handle on that, but I want at least 2 lav mics going into small recorders that you can stick in a pocket. I don't want to deal with wireless audio on a wedding shoot. I think you just want multiple recorders.
Yeah. And the Zoom H1 might be a little big to put in people's pockets, so
right.
I guess
you might want something a little smaller.
Something small, yeah.
I use the Tascam DR08, but they don't make that anymore. So whatever the new tiny pocket recorder is that you can plug a lav mic into is what I'd suggest.
The lenses are clearly very important, and I don't know what Canon glass he has. If his Canon glass gives him all the range he would want for a wedding, then maybe he wants to either use it with a Canon DSLR or get a Metabone speed booster for a Panasonic camera. But I know that he's talking about the 12 to 35 and the 35 to 100 millimeter lens for the GH5. I love those lenses, and I think they're great for documentary. They could be a little bit limiting for weddings, depending on how you want to shoot them. I think the 35 to 100 could be a good close-up camera. If you're not too far away with your camera. If you're able to get near the front of the church and zoom in, that could be a really good lens. But then you don't have the ability to zoom out and see the whole church very well either. So you might find yourself swapping lenses from that vantage point. Or like we used to use the 14 to 140 lens, which is amazing focal range, but the downside was it was f4 and it
f4
darkened
to
all the way to
5.6.
5.8. Yeah.
5.8, you're right.
Yeah.
That's again why maybe like on a GH5S, maybe that's acceptable, but it was always limiting. There were times when I was like, I want to use that lens and I can't because it's too dark. And I'd have to go like my closest prime was like a 45 millimeter prime, and that's just not tight enough. So
yeah. Well, yeah, back then we were shooting with GH1s and GH2s, and I'm sure their ISO performance was a lot worse than the current cameras on the market.
Yep. So we just spent, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 grand, something like that. Maybe more,
for
maybe
our
closer
kit?
to 10. I know, I'm just saying the stuff we just listed, how much would all that cost?
Oh.
It's probably a $7,000 to $10,000 kit we just kind of outlined, do you think?
Yeah, probably. I mean, when we started, I think we spent something like $3,000 or $4,000, and we split it between the two of us.
That's how we got our start. Worked out pretty well, though, I think.
But that was a GH1 and a camcorder, and then we already had tripods, and so
we bought some really crappy audio gear, which we improved later on.
Yeah,
we wasted some money on some shoulder mount rigs and things like that. Maybe it wasn't a waste, but
Yeah, I think the moral of the story is you don't need all the perfect gear to start shooting weddings. Just look at where your gaps are. Like you said, you already have all this audio gear. You might be okay there if you're creative.
We got an email from Ed. He wants to record a concert, but he finds the audio levels are always overloaded, even on the GH5's lowest recording level. You ever have any problems with the in-camera audio in really loud environments, Griffin?
I realize I haven't, probably because I haven't relied solely on the camera for audio in those kinds of situations. I'm thinking about a concert I recorded for Bloomberg Television when I was working there. And I'm sure I'm always trying to get redundant audio. So I'm sure I put an audio recorder somewhere in the room with a microphone just to get the real audio there. And then I was also probably plugged into the board to get the nice audio coming through the speakers. And then on top of that, my internal microphone on the camera is going, but ultimately that's not what I'm relying on. So I haven't had that problem, but I can see why this would be a problem. If you're close to the speakers and all you're doing is recording with the, through
camera mic, yeah.
Yeah, he's talking about he's not even plugging in a microphone. He's just using the internal mic because
in his email he kind of he explains he's trying to keep a low profile. He says the band knows he's recording, but he doesn't think security is gonna be happy with him shooting, so he's trying to keep a low profile.
Yeah. So I imagine it's got to be kind of like, I mean, you may be smarter about this than me, but I think about how audio levels on the camera have got to be kind of like gain or ISO on a camera. They engineer it to have a starting point and they can boost it from there, but they can't really go any lower. So if Panasonic designs the camera to be this is its lowest audio recording level, I imagine that is a hard stop, that there's nothing you can really do about it.
Yeah, that's definitely a potential. And the other thing that I was thinking could be happening, and I'm definitely guessing and just theorizing at this point, it's hard to say. He's saying he's using the lowest settings in the camera that are available. So I think there's probably not a good option for in-camera audio for this situation. But what might be happening is it's actually possible to clip the physical elements of a microphone. I'm guessing that the microphone element inside the camera is extremely small. And basically what's happening is a diaphragm is moving, up and down with the sound and moving like an electromagnet. And you can actually, if sound is so loud, you can force that to clip. Basically, it's hitting its limits and can't move any farther. And it's probably very small and so you're probably clipping the physical microphone. And there's just no way to save that. Just the microphone can't handle those sound pressure levels that you're getting. So, I think the key is kind of what you said at the beginning of this, Griffin, is, getting board audio. I think if you're shooting a band, you want to get a mix straight from the board. And if you know the band, maybe that's something that you can, work with them in advance to have the sound guy give you an output to an audio recorder. And that would be unobtrusive because it's up at the soundboard, and you can move along. So that would be my suggestion.
Or, I think just thinking about, like you said, just thinking about other sources of audio, like you also are carrying a phone around with you. I don't know how your phone performs in that situation. Maybe it performs better. Try rolling audio on it too and see what that gets you.
Yeah, I bet it would work better.
I also wonder if there's possibly a physical fix to this. Like, what if you put 10 pieces of tape
over it? Yeah, anything to reduce that sound pressure level. Obviously, it's going to attenuate different frequencies at different levels, so it might sound not great, but it might give you something usable.
Yeah.
Immediately I got like the attenuator cans you put over your head, like you put on a little kid at a concert or something. I had to see like putting one of those on your camera. Yeah,
can't you just buy an earplug and like tape it to your camera?
You might be able to. Is there like an actual like cutout for the microphone on these things, or is it just like in the cracks of the camera? I don't even know.
Let's look at the GH3 I'm shooting with right now. There's little air gaps. Same on the.
I don't see one on the G85, but I could be wrong. I'm just missing a picture.
Same on the GH5. It's on top of the camera. So yeah, I kind of wonder if you covered those up somehow. But I wonder in a situation like that, it's so loud. It's probably reverberating the entire camera body. Like, it's still going to make its way through, right? The sound waves.
Yeah, probably. But it might be fun to play with.
Yeah.
Record the board audio. It's going to sound way better no matter what.
Yeah. Here's a YouTube comment we got from This Way Up World, who this person has a question. I am starting to do a lot more editing and starting to get RSI. That's repetitive stress, I think. Repeated stress, something. I can't remember what the acronym is. But he's getting aches on his fingers and wrists. Currently using a MacBook Pro 15-inch with a separate Logitech mouse on my left hand and also a Magic Trackpad 2. What accessories do you use in your editing, and are there any exercises or habits that you have to avoid problems?
Repetitive strain injury, RSI.
That's what it is.
There you go.
Do you ever get repetitive strain injury?
Thankfully, it's not been an issue for me yet. You know, I'm on a computer a lot for work, but no, it has not been an issue. And when I edit, just this happened because I used to commute on a train every day. So I did all my editing on a laptop on a train. So I'm used to editing with a laptop sitting on my lap, and that's it. And like, even to this day, that's how I'll go edit, because that's just how I'm comfortable. It's kind of strange.
Yeah.
I don't hook up an external monitor or a keyboard or mouse or trackpad. I just use the laptop, trackpad, and keyboard, and that's how I'm used to editing. And I feel like I can't change it now. Isn't that kind of weird?
Yeah. Well, I definitely learned how to edit on a laptop, and so I still kind of edit that way. I like having a trackpad. I use the Magic Trackpad as well on my iMac because that's how I feel comfortable. I don't use a mouse. But I do find that when I edit a lot on my laptop, and my wife Amy tries to help me, she like points out when I'm doing this, and she was responsible for me getting onto a better desk and a better chair. But I'll edit on the laptop sitting at a table, and that's not the greatest way to edit because you are like looking down at it, and it just changes your whole posture into this hunch. And I realize I do kind of get some stress in my back, and I feel like occasionally I am getting massages to help me with that. I think some of that is also like me carrying 30 pounds of camera gear in a backpack around on my back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the trick is breaking up that habit. I'm trying not to always edit like that. Try to take breaks from editing. I do some hand exercises every once in a while. I have like a little ball that I'll roll around in my hand.
Sounds kind of lame, but hey, whatever floats your boat.
It's about health, Nick. Here's a YouTube comment for you, Nick. It's also about your health. This is from Tobias, who asks, Nick, as a father, how do you balance your life and find time for filmmaking with kids and full-time work? That's something that he's trying to do.
Good. Yeah, you don't. All right, there's no way to find the right balance. There's not enough time in the day. And I think Tobias knows this too. When I was doing wedding videography, I had a full-time job, I had family, and I was doing that. It was a lot. It was hard. Weddings are always on Saturdays, so basically I would always try and limit myself to like 1 or 2 a month. I tried not to have every single weekend be a wedding video weekend. And then, like I said, I had this long commute every day to my full-time job, which was the perfect time to get editing done. So that kind of worked out. These days, I definitely have found I have to cut back on something, and filmmaking is definitely one of the things that I do less of. I don't do wedding videos anymore. I kind of focus on the family and the full-time job a little bit more. This is kind of my outlet now. How do I find time for this? I do it after the kids go to sleep. So kids are asleep right now. As Griffin well knows that he has to stay up way late for me because 8 o'clock on the West Coast is 11 o'clock in New York. Yeah. So sorry, Griffin. I make Griffin pay. That's how I
didn't think about it, but with your move coming up, you're moving into a new house. Mm-hmm. I should have lobbied for you to move to my time zone.
Right. Instead, we're just moving 10 minutes down the road, unfortunately. So I don't think there's a time zone change. I'll have to double check that. But since we're staying in the same town, I think this time zone is likely the same.
I'm glad to hear that you are prioritizing your children and your family over
you have
shooting
to
wedding
sometimes.
videos.
You have to sometimes. Doesn't hurt that my, the job I've moved into pays well enough where I don't feel like I need the income anymore either.
Yeah.
We got a YouTube comment from Mike Vrobel. Griffin, I'm reading this one, okay? You're just going to have to settle down. Griffin and Nick, where do you store media assets you reuse in multiple videos? What's your workflow for these kind of things? He's saying he has logo images that he uses in almost every video, and he's thinking of your videos like Hey, Filmmaker and Look What Griffin Did, your end credits. How do you store that so you can reuse it in every project?
Well, luckily, those assets aren't very big. Like,
little bitty.
Yeah, that final little time lapse I use on my videos, I don't even know how big that is. It's got to be under a gig. It's probably even smaller than that.
Probably
it's only a few seconds long
or something. Yeah.
I mean, it is like a ProRes 4K file, but it's only a few seconds long.
Ah, okay.
And a lot of those graphics are just PNG files. They might be kind of big for an image, but ultimately they don't take up that much disk space. But I do find that I need them on multiple machines and multiple hard drives because I find myself editing sometimes on my iMac at home. Sometimes I'm editing the podcast on a laptop on the road. And so I find myself copying them to different places. But I guess the Final Cut project files that I'm using or the libraries that I've set up know where to reference those things. So I'm not continually syncing them.
But basically, you have them sitting on every hard drive you might possibly be using.
Yeah, actually, let me just pull up my Heyfilm podcast folder and see what's in here. Oh, yeah, I have a file called hifending.mov. This was something, I don't even know if I told you about this. A few months ago, I realized it was kind of tedious that we have all these graphical elements that happen at the end of the podcast, like there's a picture of us and there's text that says Hey Indie Filmmakers, and then some of the text disappears in time with the beat of the music. And so there's all these it was like 8 layers of things in my timeline, and I'd have to adjust endpoints and outpoints every time I would do the edit. And I just realized it was stupid to be adjusting the endpoints and outpoints of multiple things that all are going to have the same endpoints and outpoints every time.
So you just rented them down or together and save that as a file?
Yeah, I exported the thing as a ProRes 4444 file because it includes transparency. Because part of it was that I cut out a black rectangle to include that little bloopers thing that always happens at the end of the podcast.
Yeah, usually me being stupid. Yep, I remember.
And then I also tied the music to it, so it's all just kind of, now it's just one video file. And really all it takes now is like one cut in the middle of that video file that lets me kind of adjust the timing. Like depending on the length of the blooper, I can just adjust those points, but half the edits are already made for me.
You're so smart.
So that's a 1.33 gigabyte file that I use in every episode. That end tag time lapse is only 288 megabytes. And then I have a folder called artwork, which has some like various art that we use occasionally. And I have a folder. So
do you have to bring
music.
Those in? Like, do you do a new library for every episode, or do you have like a Hey Indie Filmmakers library?
I have one Hey Indie Filmmakers library. Actually, I have multiple ones because they exist across machines. So like,
okay.
I have one on my iMac and one on my MacBook Pro, and the one on my MacBook Pro maybe has like every other episode.
But in theory, like this video file you've created is already in that library, so you're not having to re-import it every time. You're just dropping it
exactly.
in again.
Yeah, and the way I actually edit the podcast is I'll just go to the last episode that I edited on that machine,
copy and paste,
and copy the things out.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so every episode is kind of a template for the next episode. Well, that's our last question for the day. Thank you, Mike, for the question.
Done and done. We did good.
Whew.
We did good.
So next week, we've come to the end of our 8-episode run here. This was episode 56 of the podcast, which means next week we'll take a 1-week break before our next full episode. But we do have
for our next season.
Bonus.
What season did we just finish? And what season is starting?
I don't know. I've never called them seasons. You always do. But
I like it. If we're taking 8 episodes in a season and we take a break for a week and then we start. This just finished our 7th season.
Yeah, but it's not a season.
That's awesome. It is a season. Why wouldn't it be a season?
I don't know.
I don't know why you gotta be like that.
Maybe for the next episode, we need to figure out how many hours we've actually produced of this show. I have no sense of that.
A lot. Many hours.
I mean, it's probably in the ballpark of 42 hours.
I was gonna 40 something because we're usually well under an hour, right? Or maybe not well under, but under.
Yeah.
Good. We'll keep it going.
Yeah, we have some math to do, so we'll see you next time.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Check, check. Video is rolling. I've only got 5 hours left on this SD card.
I only have 37 minutes, so...
Okay, we'll speed it up.